All right, Doc, thanks for coming. Appreciate having you.
Thanks for having me. What a great place, huh?
It's not bad, huh?
No, I tell you what, really nice, really nice. First time I had the opportunity to be here. I know we had some players here last summer, and they came back and were raving about what a nice place it was. So I figured I better come down here and check this thing out, huh?
Well, we're going to be easy on here tonight. We'll talk a little bit about you got several players who could get picked this weekend, and that's not the whole story. It's just 7 rounds of a draft, but they could land free agent deals. They could get into camp and make some noise. But first things first, you finished spring football, and after a couple of days of evaluating, you decided to name a quarterback. Talk to us a little bit about that process.
Well, the quarterback position is such an intangible position, and a lot more goes into being a great leader at that position. Have a guy that's got the intangibles and just the actual skill and being able to throw football and that type of thing. So, a lot of thought went into it. You have to have somebody that has got the great leadership skills. You got to have guys that somebody that the football team has a lot of confidence in. And, of course, you have to have guys that got the skill set that you think can move the ball and move your football team. So we came out of there. We thought Birdsong had all those things. The other thing he kind of brought to the table is he's played 2 years against major college football teams, and so he's not going to have his feet wet against Purdue on that first game. So we're excited about it. Our team has confidence in him, and we're anxious to see how it goes from there.
Now, Doc, when does the type of buzz and the number of scouts and things like that, guys like that, come to you? Is it because of the buzz that came in before the season, or as things progressed during the year, did you kind of see a momentum build and more guys come in to evaluate your guys?
Well, we get a lot of scouts that come through there, and you never truly know what those scouts are actually looking for. I know, for example, with the Darryl Roberts situation, there's a lot of general managers that weren't real happy with their scouts because they spent a lot of time there, and he didn't get invited to the combine. We had a hard time getting him into an all-star game, and I told every scout that walked in there, I said, this guy's going to play in the NFL someday. You got to take a good look at him. But they didn't. And then after our pro day, he ran extremely well. He benched extremely well. He's very athletic. And I think I've heard several people tell me that they had some scouts that got major issues because he didn't do a great job evaluating him during the season.
Now, speaking of kind of like your role in kind of like the draft process, now obviously it's getting these guys, to this point where they graduate, their eligibility is exhausted, and then it's into the draft process for them. What does the coach do after that? I mean, is it just kind of fielding questions from scouts and such, or is there any proactive stances that the coaches take at this level? How does it work for you guys?
Well, the NFL, they have such an extensive group of people that they do use to evaluate players. And I'll be honest with you, the players got to get themselves drafted. I mean, when you turn on that tape, the bottom line is, can you play? And they come in, and go to the pro day, you got to perform on that pro day with their 40 times and vertical jumps. But, it's amazing. I was looking at some things today that, you talk about mistakes that are made in the draft, and those NFL guys sure make a lot of them. And I was looking, the Malcolm Butler kid who made the play in the Super Bowl to win the Super Bowl for the Patriots was an undrafted free agent from Alabama State. And then I was looking at some other names, and here's some guys throughout the years. You've all heard of John Randall from the Vikings. He was an undrafted player. You talk about Tony Romo of the Cowboys was an undrafted player. It went as a free agent. So, Wes Walker, Wayne Chebet, Rod Smith, London Fletcher, Kurt Warner, the quarterback who won a Super Bowl, Adam Ventura, the great punter, Priest Holmes, Antonio Gates, and Warren Moon, the great quarterback with Houston all those years, were all kids that were not picked in the draft. So it's not an exact science. The NFL make a lot of mistakes, and there's a lot of really good players out there, and I think we have some of them that can help NFL teams that have to go as free agents and find a way to make it.
Now, you start watching these kids maybe when they're 15, 16 years old. So now they're 21, 22, 23-year-old men. How tough is it to project when you first start seeing these kids to where they go by the time they're 4th or 5th year seniors? Because you look at Darryl Roberts was a 2-star recruit. Chris Jaspers was a walk-on for you. A guy we've talked a lot about tonight, Kevin White, was a junior college guy who wasn't really recruited out of high school. You talk about it being an inexact science, but how tough is that to project for you?
Well, I think the bottom line is at the end of the day, when we try to, when we recruit players, we sure don't base a whole lot of it on stars. I could care less how many stars they have. The thing we've tried to do at Marshall, I think it's worked out well for us. We recruit guys, number one, that football is important to them. They love football. They're extremely tough because we take great pride. There's nowhere to hide in our program. If you're not tough, you don't like ball, chances are you won't survive. And if you get a guy that really loves football and's got a skill set that he can be a player, and he loves what it's all about and likes to work extremely hard, then normally good things happen to those kids. Darryl Roberts is an example. Neville Hewitt's a guy that had 0 stars, and he was a defensive player of the year in our conference. The guy's going to play a lot of football in the future. And how about Cato and Schuler? They're going to be Hall of Fame guys that eventually down the road, and they had probably no. I tease Schuler and Cato all the time at practice. They were no stars. They were not even ranked. So, that being said, it's more about the guys that got the physical ability, and football's a tough game. There's a lot more goes into it than just athletic ability.
Is that a tribute, though, to the development at Marshall, where you could bring in these guys who are kind of unheralded guys nobody's really talking about, but you can turn them into guys who are either NFL draft picks or they're getting a chance to play at the next level? That's got to be a huge selling point.
Well, we take great pride in developing players. I mean, what we do in the offseason with our strength program, and our strength coach, Scott Sinclair, does a tremendous job with those guys. And again, we take great pride in developing players. You guys have been down to watch us practice. We have a guy named Stanley Jean Feliz who looks like an NFL tackle that was not recruited by anybody, but he's going to play someday in the NFL. And we got a lot of other young players that are similar to Stanley that you've seen develop through our strength program, through our off-season program, and what we do with these players to get them ready to go play.
How much do intangibles play with these kids? I mean, like, you talk a lot about football is important to them in the sense that they take so much of this so seriously. How does that kind of move into the NFL draft process where, you look at 40 times, you look at bench presses and broad jumps and things like that, but these intangibles are the things that you can't really measure, but they're what seems to make guys stand out.
Well, there's no question. Tangibles are extremely important, and I'm watching this draft in a couple different ways. And one of the things I want to see is the NFL is talking about how they're taking so much character into consideration. When I talk to our football team, the last thing I tell them every time we walk off the field is that every decision you make has consequences. I'm anxious to see in this draft that some of the decisions some of these so-called top 10 players have made doesn't have a consequence. And for a guy like me that sits there and tells those kids that every day after practice, a guy that has all the issues in the world gets drafted as a top 5 pick, that makes our job harder. So I'm anxious to see I was watching an article as I was working out the other day or watching TV, and they were talking about of the top 10 rated players in the draft, 6 of them have major issues. Now, how about that? What are they going to do? I mean, let's actually, the NFL, they talk out of both sides of their mouth. They talk about wanting to, draft character guys and how important that character is and all that, but yet they turn right around and the first player picked in the draft has all these issues. Now, this sends a wrong message to the kids that I've got to deal with. It sends a wrong message to high school players. And so I'm anxious to see in this draft, let's talk about that guy that got arrested for marijuana 2 days before the draft and see how high he does go. Hopefully he falls clear out of the first round. So maybe when we talk to our kids down the road, we can tell them the decisions really do have consequences, and people are putting a lot more emphasis on the character part of it than they are the actual football ability that they have.
Now, how are your guys kind of feeling leading up to this weekend? I mean, we've talked about Darryl a lot, but you talk to Alex Mirabal. He loves what Chris Jaspers can do, and he feels that this is a guy who can have a very, very long career in the NFL. And you have guys like Neville Hewitt, Defensive Player of the Year, James Rouse, preseason Defensive Player of the Year. How are they feeling right now in talking to them, and how confident do they feel coming into this weekend?
Well, I think they're all nervous. They're all excited. This is something they dreamed about their entire life, and all of those guys you mentioned are going to get a shot. I talked to every one of them today. I talked to Cato earlier today. I talked to Schuler. I talked to every kid on the phone today, and just told them, hey, look, I'm proud of you. You guys have fought. You fought your whole life to get to where you are. Regardless of what happens, you'll be fine. I mean, find a way to get into camp, and like I mentioned, all these guys right here are all won Super Bowls or played in Super Bowls. Not one of them was drafted. So anybody, if all those guys have the skill set to play at that level, they'll get the opportunity. So it's what they do with that opportunity once they get it.
And Cato is an interesting subject. Here's a person who broke records of Chad Pennington, Byron Leftwich, 2 first-round draft pick quarterbacks, and his buzz going into this draft is nowhere near where those guys were. How much do you feel people are underestimating Cato at this point as a viable NFL quarterback consideration? Well,
I talked to him today. He did the pro day down in Miami, and he talked to those Miami coaches, called him yesterday, and it was interesting. Coach Mirabal was at a high school practice in West Palm Beach yesterday, and a guy named Gerald Christian was there, who was a tight end that was recruited initially at Florida, and then it was at Louisville, and said Cato threw it better than anybody down there at that pro day. And, I see all these pro scouts come in and say, well, he's 178 pounds. And my answer to them was, there's a lot of really bad quarterbacks in your league that can't throw it. And that being said, I think the kid, he never missed one practice. He never missed one game. He's the most competitive kid I've ever coached. There's something about, the competitiveness that kid has. I was with Phillip Rivers at NC State, and Phillip has done extremely well. And, all those great quarterbacks I've been around during the years that played in the NFL and won Super Bowls, this kid throws it as well as any of them. So hopefully he'll get a chance. He'll get into that league at some point and get into camp, and they'll find out what he can do and see that he does have the ability to throw it and do the things it takes to be a great quarterback.
And with such a long history and resume that you have, WVU, NC State, Florida, Marshall, what's it like to watch all the guys that you've experienced and all the guys that you've coached, that have been able to go on to the next level, go on to enjoy days like today and tomorrow and Saturday, just having that honor of being picked into the league. What's that like for them, and you? What's it like for you as a coach to kind of see them be able to enjoy that? Well,
it's great. I mean, the one thing I tell kids, every time when they're sitting in my office as a recruit, I say, I got two things I want to happen for you. I said, number one, I want you to walk out of Marshall University with a college degree. And the second thing, I want you to walk out the NFL contract. And a lot of people say, Doc, you shouldn't talk about that. I said, yeah, I should. I said, I want guys that have extremely high dreams and expectations, because I do. And I want to surround myself with those kind of people. And it's just fun to sit back and watch how those kids have matured from young kids coming in. They've grown into men, and now they got the opportunity to reach that dream, which a lot of them have. And there's 5 or 6 guys that will get that opportunity, and it's fun to watch them go on and see those dreams come true.
Kind of in that same vein, you had Mario Harvey, Lee Smith, Aaron Dobson, guys that were drafted while you were at Marshall. Garrett Scott last year, had an unfortunate obstacle. He couldn't play in the NFL. The guys that are picked this year, if they're picked or sign free agent deals and they get in the league, this is your first group at Marshall that you sat in their living rooms and sold them for Marshall, and they've graduated to the NFL. Does that make this group extra special for you?
Well, it does. And, it's what they accomplished, too. I mean, these teams, they got us back to winning championships. And, this group right here, the last 2 years have won 23 football games. That's a lot of games that they've had the opportunity to go out and play and win. So it is a special group because it got us back to where we want to be, and that's winning championships, and they were a big part of it. And the great thing about this group is they're all walking, next week, Neville Hewitt's graduating, and, Daryl's already graduated, and Rouse has already graduated, Jasper's already graduated. So you see those guys not only walking out of here, hopefully with that NFL contract, but they also have the college degree, which is something they're going to be able to fall back on someday.
How long did Doc Holliday, the player, hang on to that NFL dream?
It lasted about, I was not very long, because I've realized pretty quick, it must have been that coach coming out of me. I wasn't a very good athlete. So I knew, number one, I better get my education, and I tried, but it was my whole deal. I wanted to stay involved in the game, and my way of staying involved in the game sure as hell wasn't playing the NFL. So I knew I had to find an avenue, and coaching was it.